So good morning. How you guys doing? Sweet. Hello. Hey, it's been only 1 week out of the last 8 weeks that Jason Campbell hasn't been our artist in the back. Would you show him love for the last in a stretch of weeks with him doing art back there? Thank you so much, Jason Campbell, for your help, your art, your wisdom, helping me out with this series, the Supervillain Parables. I should have preached on Mr. Freeze today, right? See what I did? See what I did? Come on, Cleveland. All right. But no, today is Joker and Harley Quinn, as you saw in that clip. Harley Quinn is unique among villains because she didn't start off, she's one of the very few characters that didn't start off as a comic book character. She actually first appeared in Batman, the animated series, and she was just one of Joker's lackeys in one episode called The Joker's Favor. And she was so liked by audiences, her popularity started to increase so much that they eventually included her no longer just as one-off character. They gave her, a spot in the DC Comics universe, and eventually she got her own animated TV series. Now she's a quintessential part of the Batman universe. It's actually today, you almost can't talk about Joker without talking about Harley. And for those of us who are like unks and boomers, like, who's Harley Quinn even? But this has been a development in the last 20, 30 years where it's like now the Joker, this is a major part of Batman universe. So in 1994, Harley originally appeared in the comic book pages. Her origin story did after, she was popular and this one-off episode and all that. So her origin story appeared in a comic book called The Batman Adventures Mad Love. And it's a one-issue backstory, and it's widely considered to be the definitive origin story for Harley Quinn, for her story. And later that was adapted into this animated episode for the new Batman Adventures in 1999. So I'll also incorporate some little tidbits from another origin story that came much later that's just called Harleen. That's in the DC Black Label. But Mad Love, the one that you saw the animated version of, that comic tells us that Harley Quinn used to be a psychiatrist whose name was Dr. Harleen Quinzel, who did an internship at Arkham Asylum, which is, if you're familiar with Batman, where Gotham's high-profile super criminal, minds are kept. One day, Joker, when she's an intern there, sneaks out of his cell, and he leaves a single rose on her desk with a note that says, "Come down and see me sometime." That's Joker Riz. And so they talk to you. That'll be a much funnier joke at the next service. They talked for a while, and she was kind of enamored with the Joker. She's just kind of enamored by him. So it took her nearly 3 months to set up her first therapy session with him. And then she, in the meantime, studied all of his tricks and gimmicks to kind of be prepared for whatever he might bring at her. She had her first therapy session with him, and it kind of disarmed her because he manipulated her the whole time, but she doesn't realize this, that he's giving these fake sob stories about his backstory and his life and his childhood. He said, "My father used to beat me up pretty badly. There was only this one time when I saw my dad really happy. He took me to the circus when I was 7. I still remember the clowns. My old man laughed so hard, I thought he'd bust a gut." He talked about how one of the clowns came out and his pants fell down to his ankles. And it was this, gimmick that they're all laughing. He said, my dad was laughing so hard, I thought he'd bust a gut. He said, so the very next night, I ran out to meet him in his Sunday pants and had him around my ankles. And I said, "Hey, Dad, look at me." And he said, I took a big fall and I tore the crotch clean out of his best pants. He said, and so while he's telling this to Harley Quinn, her and Joker are laughing hysterically together about this picture of him, and very inappropriately, he drops his pants down to his ankles in the middle of this therapy session, which happens all the time. But he does this, and so they're laughing about it, and then Joker ends by saying, "And then he broke my nose." And so she's like, "Oh," and she wells up with tears. And so eventually what happens is that Harley starts to believe that Joker wasn't a raving, homicidal madman, but a tortured soul who's crying out for love and acceptance. He's a lost, injured child trying to make the world laugh with his antics. And there to stop him always was the self-righteous figure, Batman, who just is there to make Joker's life miserable. And so Over time, Harley becomes fascinated with Joker. She begins to sympathize with him. She believes that she can fix the Joker. And as unprofessional as she knows it is, she falls in love with the Joker. Now, in this version that we saw, Mad Love, which I said is originally in the comics, it's more cartoony. It's more, quick, not believable. There's actually the later origin story called Harleen. Joker's manipulation in that is more emotionally strategic. It's more subtle. It's more layered. It's more psychological. It's more realistic. And so it explores trauma, and it explores Harleen's ambition and insecurity and the cognitive dissonance of not liking someone, but of liking someone, but strongly disapproving of how they live and how they think. Like, man, I don't want to like him, but I like him. And so in Mad Love, though, the one that we saw the clip of, his manipulation is much more exaggerated, theatrical, clearly cartoonish. So eventually Harley, in Mad Love, went to a costume and novelty shop, and she bought some supplies, and she created her own clownish wardrobe, then went back to Arkham Asylum to free the Joker so that they could be together. And Harley Quinn helps Joker escape from Arkham Asylum and becomes his accomplice. And he becomes Mr. J, my puddin', and they're accomplices who do everything together, and she's always by his side. So step by step, Dr. Harleen Quinzel, she got curious, she got charmed, she got manipulated, she starts to cross ethical lines, and then eventually she abandons her identity and lets go of who she was. And Joker the whole time is manipulating her, pulling her into crime and chaos. Chaos is his mission statement. Everything is chaos for Joker. And so Harleen Quinzel eventually is gone, and Harley Quinn was born. In fact, Joker is even the one who gives her the name Harley Quinn, referring to the olden days Harlequin kind of character. So go to Proverbs 13:20. You can grab a paperback Bible from underneath the chair in front of you. You can download the Bible app for free. Real quickly, I'm going to bust through a profile that is found in the book of Proverbs. Now, there are several types of profiles that if you go through and pull out verses, you can be like, oh, this is the profile of, for instance, the sluggard, the lazy person, or who else? The glutton. And the one that I'm going to pull out today is the fool. So throughout the book of Proverbs, there's someone described as the fool. And the fool isn't really exactly what we would call a fool today necessarily. Like, that's just a fool. That's just a dumb person or whatever. It has kind of a different profile for what a fool is. And so I'm going to kind of summarize in my own words because it's going to save us. We would be here till, the Cavs game if I didn't do that. So we'll summarize the book of Proverbs to get to a couple specific Proverbs. So the profile of the fool in the book of Proverbs is a foolish person doesn't take sin or the consequences of sin seriously. So it's very spiritual, lacking in wisdom. The fool is a constant talker, a yapper. The fool they spread slander. They're not an encourager, they're a slanderer. The fool is highly opinionated, always right, always wise in their own eyes. They reject wisdom and advice from others. They just think they're right all the time. The foolish person will not listen to his parents or obey them. Time for elbows next to you. They spurn what their father says. That's a fool, okay? So hear that, children. The foolish person is proud of his wrong decisions, proud of the foolish things that he does. The fool doesn't plan ahead, but lives without considering the impact of his actions. And a fool is known for repeating mistakes rather than learning from them. In fact, Proverbs 26:11 says, "As a dog returns to its vomit, so fools repeat their folly." So it's like this gross metaphor of a fool. They just keep doing foolish things, returning to foolish things. And it's the same way that a dog walks away, comes back, and laps up its vomit. Do you like that? People falling from windows and dogs lapping up vomit. That's what you get today. So with that profile in mind, here we go. This is our main proverb for today. Proverbs 13:20. Tattoo it on your arm. Says, Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Okay? Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Now, I memorized this on a little bit older translation of the NIV, when the NIV said, he who walks with the wise will become wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. So I just have it slightly memorized different. So when you hear me misquoted, it's only because I'm brilliant. Old Testament Hebrew scholar, a guy that's very respected, his name is Bruce Waltke, he says this. He talks about how in here, walk with, it's obviously a metaphor for the idea of I'm doing life with. This isn't just I happen to be walking with someone. It's talking about walking with the wise. It means doing life with them. It means being in companionship with them, fellowship with wise people. It means being under the instruction of, being under the encouragement of, being under the example of the wise. That's what that means. And the result is when you live life walking with the wise, you will become wise. It bleeds into you and your DNA. But on the other hand, if you are, the flip side, side B, a companion of fools, what this is saying is you will be shaped by fools, for bad, not for good. You will be shaped by fools. So if you walk with foolish people, they will be the ones who will excite your interest. Ooh, I've never thought about that. I've never done that. They will be the one who form your resolutions. They will be the ones who fix your habits. So the book of Proverbs alludes to this theme many times, the idea of being a companion with someone who is, not helpful, unwise, destructive, foolish. It talks about those who associate with gluttons. It talks about those who associate with prostitutes. It talks about those who associate with hotheads. If you associate with this kind of person, this is what the outcome will be if you walk with them, if you're a companion of them. The result, being a companion of fools, will suffer harm. There's a Bible scholar who I love. His name's Derek Kidner. He says the original Hebrew in Proverbs 13:20, it allows for a choice between two translations at the end of it. That the Hebrew going into English could be translated either way out of these two lines. And that is this, that a companion of fools suffers evil, or a companion of fools becomes evil. If you hang around with foolish people and you let them influence you, you are constantly with them, eventually all that stuff that I just went through in the profile, you suffer that evil or you become that foolish evil. And the Hebrew allows for both. Derek Kidner, I love, says this, that the theme of this Proverbs very simply is education by friendship. Education by friendship. Whoever we are friends with, whoever we are constantly with, whoever we walk with, fellowship with, have companionship with, that is who we become. In fact, I'm sure many of you have heard this kind of proverb, parable, the idea that character is caught more than it is taught. It doesn't matter how much someone says, character is caught. You catch character. It is contagious. It doesn't matter how much someone is saying what character is to you. You have to see it, and if you're around it, and you're a companion of someone, you catch that character. You will become whoever you associate with. I will become whoever I associate with. And it works both ways, positively and negatively. It's side A and side B of this proverb. The relationship of Joker and Harley Quinn is one of the clearest pop culture examples of how who you let influence you today will determine who you become tomorrow. Period. I'm finally old enough where I can look back and be like, I've seen this all my life. I've seen it all my life. Who you let influence you today will determine who you become tomorrow. So it can reshape your identity, your values, even your morality. And the point of the Proverbs is really clear. Examine who is influencing you. Don't be above examining who is influencing you at any and every stage of your life. Harley becomes Joker's companion. Eventually, Harley adopts Joker's worldview. She dresses like him. These are actual signs. She dresses like him, acts like him, and then eventually in, a very stark, over-the-top example, she begins committing crimes with him. This sermon, for those of you who have been here for the last couple months or been historically at Momentum for a long time, this sermon is meant to mirror my Batman and Robin sermon. You know, the pre-Easter sermon from March 29th. Side A of this proverb is the story of Batman and Robin. It is choosing discipleship relationships, spiritual relationships, walking with the wise. Everyone needs a Batman, a spiritual mentor, and everyone needs at least one Robin, spiritual protege that you pour into. That's side A of this proverb. He who walks with the wise will grow wise. But side B of this proverb is the story of the Joker and Harley Quinn. But a companion of fools suffers harm. It's allowing yourself to drift into being a companion of fools. People who are by worldly standards, sometimes they're great people, they're cool people, they're whatever people. They're not evil people, but they're foolish according to the wisdom of God. So how does Harley fail? Well, Harley Quinn believed that she was strong enough to stand next to chaos and not be changed by it. And that is the danger, that we could fall spiritually because we believe that we are strong enough to stand next to foolishness and not be changed by it. But eventually, chaos did change her, and eventually foolishness does destroy us. It harms us or turns us evil in the way that we see in Proverbs. One of my favorite verses, I've brought this up a couple times through the years too, but I ran out of material, so I just put it in here again. John 3:22. Early in Jesus' ministry, he takes on some new disciples, some spiritual Robins. And it has this verse as like a transitional verse. It's like a quote-unquote throwaway verse. If you're reading through John, you might just buzz by this and be like, okay, transition onto the next chunk or story. And it says this in John 3:22. After this, I mean, look how early we are in the gospel. It's chapter 3. After this, Jesus and his disciples went out into the Judean countryside where he spent some time with them and baptized. Okay, this is so interesting because it wasn't until I knew what this Greek word was, spend some time with them, that I was like, wow, that's really interesting. The Greek word is diatribo, rhymes with Tim Tebow. Diatribo, anyways, moving on. I want to make fun of Tim Tebow's cheesiness, but he's a great guy, but he is cheesy as Velveeta. So, spent some time with them, diatribo, and what it literally means, the Greek word is spend some time with, rubbing off on. Isn't that interesting? Like spending time with and rubbing off on. So rubbing off on one another is basically what that idea is, rubbing off on one another. So picture this. Picture a getaway car in a robbery that rubs against a parked car on the getaway. It rubs against a parked car. And the forensics team comes in like CSI crap and sees that some of the paint from the getaway car rubbed off on that parked car, and the analysis of those small fragments of paint left behind at the scene can be used to match to a specific vehicle. And that's the rubbing off, that's diatribo. It went by and it just rubbed off, but there's, you can match it like, oh, that's from that car. And this is the way it works with relationships. This is what Jesus is doing with his disciples. He's like, okay, I have these new followers. Now I'm going to spend time with them. I'm going to rub off on them. I want them to become like me and to receive my spiritual DNA. I'm going to spend time with them and rub off on them. So young people, one day your parents might look at you and say, I don't like that you're starting to sound like or act like, fill in the name of a kid that you can tell you hang out with that they really don't like that much, okay? You're starting to sound like so-and-so. You're starting to act like so. You're starting to not do your stuff. You're starting to have an attitude like so-and-so. Have anybody been there as a parent or as a kid? Oh, yeah. Just absolutely. And so, yeah, the whole point is, it's the rubbing off of. It's diatribo. It means they don't like who they think is being a great influence on you. Whether you're aware of it or not, that person is influencing you, and you're starting to use their isms, the things that they say. You're starting to dress like them, like Harley Quinn to Joker. You're starting to have an attitude, whatever it is. And don't get defensive, because if you get defensive, you're a fool. You're not listening to your parents' instruction. They have wisdom. They have the smarts. Listen and take that seriously. What is it about them that I need to be very careful not to start doing, saying, acting like that? Because my parents think that that's foolish, whatever it is. Harley Quinn stayed too close to the Joker, and he rubbed off on her diatribo. That's what this is about. It's a very simple principle, but it takes great wisdom to constantly self-evaluate and say, okay, walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. But here's the deal. It happens to adults too, doesn't it? It does happen to adults too. Adults absolutely underestimate how susceptible we are to influence by others. And I think the biggest obstacle in the sermon today is that a lot of adults are like, yeah, that's a kid thing. Man, that was a great sermon for those kids, Dan. That is often the most foolish comment that I get. So that'll teach you like not to say that to me. That was a great one for the young people today or whatever. The adults are so, I know I am. I'm so susceptible. Like people rubbing off on me and me starting to pick up things. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to pick up that attitude, that response, that ism, that saying, that name, that whatever it is. I don't want to pick up on that, but we are so susceptible. I mean, do you think that I am or that you are strong enough to stand next to chaos or foolishness and that it won't influence us, to walk with, to be companions of? Absolutely not. If you were, here's a small example. If you work around, and this isn't the end-all, be-all, it's an example. If you work around a bunch of people who swear all the time, isn't it harder to come home and not swear when you're angry or you're getting impatient or you want to laugh or whatever it is? It's so totally hard when you are around people who swear all the time. Then you come home and you drop something and you're like, mother, whoa, hey, whoa. Where did that come from? Well, son of a, whoa, like, dang. You're like, man, it's diatribo. It's rubbing off on me. And it's just because of the people that I'm around. And it works that way with so many other things. But there's a psychologist whose name was Solomon Asch. He did a famous scientific experiment where he asked a group of people to identify which of 3 black lines on one page. There's like a short one, a medium one, and a very long one on one page. Then he has another page that he puts up, and it has, obviously, for instance, the medium line. And so everyone in the group is an actor except for one subject. They're the only one that doesn't know that they're, surrounded by actors. And so basically what happens in the study in each group, only one person being the actual test subject, all the other actors or stooges, basically what their accomplices working for Ash, the actor gave distinctly, obviously wrong answers at times because the people would say, oh yeah, it's the really short one. And you're like, and it's really obvious. It's the medium one. It's a really short one. And everyone agrees. And so a third of the time, more than a third of the time, the real test subject, the one who doesn't know what's going on, would conform to the whole group. Even though it was crazy obvious, it's the long one or the short one. It's the medium one. There's no doubt. And so, yeah, it's the medium one. What? That's nuts. And so more than a third would give the incorrect answer along with the group, unwilling to be singled out for rebelling against what apparently was the group wisdom. Like they were unwilling to say, it's not it's not. Come on, it's obviously the medium one. They were unwilling to do that. So the results completely surprised the researcher, Ash, who concluded that the human desire to be accepted into a group can convince even intelligent people to defy logic simply to fit in. So this is intelligent people. This isn't saying you're stupid. It's not that kind of fool. That is totally different kind of fool. Okay, this is spiritually speaking and a lack of wisdom. And it's believing that you're always right and that you can't be influenced by other people and all the things that we see in that profile. But it's conformity based on social pressure. Conformity is any intentional changing of your behavior to be similar to members in a group. It's social pressure. And we are susceptible to it as much as kids are, as much as students are. Adults are susceptible. Bad influences rub off on us. Those jokers rub off on us, man. And we have this insecurity that we want to fit in. Like we want people to like us, and we don't want to be the rebel to speak up and be like, guys, that's totally wrong. or guys, hey, no, let's not do that thing, to speak up and to go against it. Romans 12:2 says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind based on the Holy Spirit living inside of you. So the world's patterns can rub off on us, or they wouldn't say this. They wouldn't say this to Christian adults in Rome. Hey, don't conform. What's the point of even saying it unless man, adults are susceptible. Another interesting scientific study is after the atrocities performed by the Nazis in World War II, there's a psychologist named Stanley Milgram who was, it's a famous study from the 1960s, that he was like, man, what was going on in German culture that all those people would listen to the Nazi officers and do those terrible things that they did? So he wanted to test how far people would go in obeying authority, okay? And he does this famous study where subjects are told that they're helping with a memory learning experience, and the test subject, the one person who doesn't know what's going on, is seated behind this thing of buttons that supposedly give electric shocks to someone else. Well, they see this someone else, the learner, the one who's trying to learn the memory stuff. They see him in the other room. They see him seated in what looks like basically an electric chair. He gets all strapped up, and they get to, the test subject that doesn't know what's going on, they actually get to feel a little slight shock to know that there's shocks given, like, oh, shocks are given. But all the shocks are actually going to be fake. And so they sit down, and basically every time the person purposefully gets a memory question wrong, they're supposed to keep increasing the shock going along this list of buttons by 15 volts every time. It starts with 15 volts and just keeps going up all the way to 450 volts. That's a lot of voltage. And so basically it starts working their way through these fake, and here's the person on the other side of the wall. At 75 volts, the learner emits grunts of pain, fakes, grunts of pain. Later, they would yell and insist that the person stop. By 150 volts, the learner would complain specifically about a heart condition. He'd be on the other side of the wall, man, you got to stop. I got a heart condition. And so if the subject hesitated, the one who's being tested, if they hesitated, there's an authority figure in the room who very calmly had 4 responses just to keep them going. And they were responses like things like, please continue. Wait, they just said they have a heart condition. The experiment requires that you continue. They just had these very bland, calm statements to tell them it is important that you continue. That kind of stuff. And so they would either continue or not. But out of 40 subjects in the first time they did this test, 100% of them continued to at least 300 volts. That is past the yelling, past the heart condition thing, past pounding on the wall is one of the steps. And then 65% continued to the highest levels of 450 volts. Even though at one point, the person on the other side of the wall stops making noise, pretending to either pass out or be unresponsive. They stop making noise, and the person just keeps going, please, it's important that you just continue. Okay? Just keeps giving the voltage, the shocks or whatever. It's really, and then 35%, only 35% defied the authoritative figure and stopped before the highest levels. And it's like, what came out of this study was the idea, this wasn't a German culture thing. Oh, no. This wasn't a Nazi problem. This is a human problem. The person was afraid to say to either a trusted or authoritative figure, no, I'm not going any further. This is wrong. Like I'm hurting them. They believed they were hurting them and just kept going. And so ordinary people will do things they believe are wrong when influenced by a trusted or authoritative voice. The point is, if you walk with the wrong voices long enough, they will eventually drown out the right voices. The Holy Spirit telling you inside, no, this should make you feel uncomfortable. This is wrong. This is not right. This is unwise. But eventually, not wanting to speak against authority or someone you trust, eventually that voice overrides the other. So the main question that this proverb makes us wrestle with, like God knows every time we get to chapter 13 of Proverbs, we're going to hit that and be like, ooh, let me evaluate right now at this point in my life, who is shaping my life right now? Who have you allowed into your circle of influence? And what are they doing to your soul, good or bad? Because people are rubbing off on you. They're absolutely rubbing off on you. And so self-evaluation is to ask tough questions that feel like stuff 7th graders and 10th graders should be asking, which they also should. Like, am I becoming enamored by a friend who normalizes sin? Am I becoming enamored with or really infatuated with, looking up to, or falling in love with a person who pressures me to compromise my convictions? Maybe I once was uncomfortable, or it felt wrong. It didn't feel normal to be in a group that gossiped a whole bunch. But I'm kind of getting used to it. I'm kind of participating now. Or friends who joke about their use of pornography, or they cheat, or they drink or smoke together, or they womanize, or they badmouth their significant other. But this repeated exposure, eventually you suffer harm. And, it's tempting to be just like a bunch of jokers, okay? It's tempting to hang out with those jokers and want to be just like them and start realizing like, oh, I really like them. They're successful. They're charming. They're whatever it is. And so, for people to start telling you you're too serious about your faith, or it's not a big deal if you ... those voices don't always sound evil. A lot of times they sound practical. A lot of times they sound modern. And so who are those voices? And if I let them creep into where they're influencing me and I'm actually starting to give them credibility, like, man, there's stuff about them that I do admire, therefore I'm picking up on their habits. It's a great thing to meditate on Psalm 1. It's a very short psalm, and just to meditate, read it over and over, consider its words, ask God what he's saying to you through it. But just the first verse in the whole book of Psalms says this: "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers." Now, I just want you to notice that progression, by the way. It's walk, stand, sit. It's a progression. Walk with, stand by, sit with. So the influences, they deepen over time. And the more that I'm a companion to foolish people, spiritually foolish people, sin just slowly moves you closer. So the people closest to you will either build you up or slowly tear you down. In most versions of Joker and Harley's story, Harley is madly in love with Joker and will do anything she can for his love and affection. Joker, on the other hand, sees Harley as nothing more than a toy. He feigns interest, he feigns affection when it suits him, but never gives a second thought about letting Harley, take the fall, become the scapegoat when he wants to escape. In fact, his lack of respect for her is so obvious in the stories, like just even in that exaggerated animation that we saw. He gives her the back of his hand at one point during that scene and then shoves her out of a window. So he has no respect for her. He's abusive. Where Joker thrives on character, more often Harley seems to be, he thrives on chaos. She seems to be conflicted. But she knows what is right. However, she's been seduced by the Joker's charm, and so he drags her into his schemes with lies and manipulations and empty promises. Eventually, Harley does break away from the Joker, though, and from his influence, from the toxicity of their relationship. They break up, and she's not a villain anymore in the comic books because of it. She got her own comic book series. The breakup happened in 2012, and now she's an anti-hero. She has her own comic series, and she's an anti-hero, no longer a villain, who's trying to get better, who's evolving in some kind of way. And I just got to be honest with you, you will never regret cutting off connection with shallow or unwise or bad influences who are in your life. You will always look back and be like, that was a good move. That was such a good move. Because I was allowing myself to be influenced, if that's the case. But you will need a positive, godly group of friends to support you, that you can lean on through that. You have to release from one and connect to the other for it even to continue to follow through at all. And if you are a parent, it doesn't matter how young or old your parents or your kids are. It will be crazy powerful for your kid to see you do this and for you to admit that you needed to do this. Why? Because that's wisdom. That's humility for your kid to one day be an adult and be like, I remember when my mom was an adult. I remember when my dad was an adult, and they made this move because they needed to. That will be so powerful for your kids to see the example of and repeat in the future. There's one dilemma that I can't not bring up through this, though, and that is throughout scriptures, we get constant, things like this. The companion of fools suffers harm, or bad company corrupts good character, from the Apostle Paul, who says that. There's all this, there's things like that throughout the wisdom of scriptures. But there's also the fact that you can't deny that Jesus ate with sinners. Jesus ate with sinners, okay? Jesus was criticized for eating with, and this is always in quotes, by the way, Jesus ate with sinners, tax collectors, prostitutes, all the time. And so he took that criticism all the time. How do you reconcile those two things? Because they absolutely need to be reconciled. What does it mean to not be a companion of fools, but to eat with sinners? Because to be like Christ is to do both. There's an old preacher in California who used to write famous books, and he's a very wise person, but he did have this one thing that he said, and I won't say his name because I'm going to make fun of him. He had this one thing that he said that was super simplistic, and I hated it. He had this thing where he said, talking about this subject of not being around bad people at all, basically, was his stance, which I don't think you can reconcile with Jesus eating with sinners. But he said, the glove gets muddy, but the mud never gets glovey. Don't you just want to, that makes me want to smack somebody, okay? I've been around violent, hot-headed people too much because it makes me want to smack that guy. But he's like, the mud, and I got to look for it because it's so dumb. The glove gets muddy, but the mud never gets glovey. I'm like, that is the dumbest thing ever. What it's saying is that being Christ-like or holiness or whatever, it never affects darkness, is what that's saying. It never affects darkness. Like, good never triumphs over evil, never influences evil, and that's just not true. Momentum exists to make disciples who make disciples. Like, that's mud getting glovey. That's what that is. Like, okay? And so what does that mean? Well, so how can we eat with sinners but protect ourselves from being corrupted by bad company? Well, one is, I think it very much begins with you have to start by admitting you are susceptible. If you're unaware of that, there's no hope. There's no hope. You begin by saying, I am susceptible. I know that I am susceptible, okay? You always have to be aware of your susceptibility to influence of any kind, and to be prayerful and cautious anytime you are entering the atmosphere of a joker. To be prayerful and cautious anytime. But what Jesus did and what he intended for us also, it's not just because he was the Son of God in flesh, but he was the influencer. He was not the one who compromised. He was the one who influenced. He was intentional. When he entered circles to eat with sinners, to be at parties with people who were far from God, he was on mission. He knew he was there for a purpose. He wasn't just being like, oh, I'm not aware at all, but I could be influenced. He was the influencer, and he was the one inviting people to follow him and walk with the wise. He was the one going in on mission to say, I have come to influence. I have come to love. I have come to encourage. I have come to be with, but I know I can be influenced, but I'm going in prayerfully and intentionally on mission. When I was a little kid, I met my best friend Jason Petz when I was 5 years old, so I got this tattoo. And he was 6. He was a year older than me, but he was the Christian kid in the neighborhood. He was the one Christian kid, And I hung out with him all the time, became best friends with him. But he would tell you this, throughout our friendship, there were over and over times where I told him, why are you so squeaky clean? One day I'm going to get you to blank. One day I'm going to get you to blank. And so he was the Christian kid who just would never do the blank thing. Like whatever that is, no, that's not, I'm not going to do that. I'm not into that. That's not me. And, it's pretty crazy that over time, that started to rub off on me. And what I found out years later was the whole time, intentionally, behind the scenes, his mom was praying for me like crazy. Jason Petz was walking into the circle of influence of mighty Dan Smith. And he was being prayed over the whole time. She was like praying for her son. Let my son influence Dan. Do not let Dan influence Jason, Lord. Don't let his negative influence, man, one day I'm going to get you to do blank. Don't let that affect him. And man, it worked prayerfully, intentionally, and Jason with great resolve. That's not who I am. That's not who I'm called to be. Influenced me, and the mud got glovey, okay? So, I know, it's the dumbest thing ever. Man, I hate that I'm quoting it, okay? But that's just the truth. And so it is very consistent to say, whoa, I'm either starting to be influenced, and I don't have the power, the resolve right now to continue to be in the circle of the joker. I just don't have the strength, so I can't right now. I have to cut this off. I'm not strong enough. And to say, I got to walk away. You'll never regret that. But on the other hand, there comes a time when you are strong enough and you can intentionally say, okay, I'm going to go on mission because I know I am susceptible, but I'm going to go on mission and prayerfully I'm going to see if the power of Christ inside of me will impact some people. And if it starts to go the other way, I'm going to pull back. I'm going to pull back. But it's very intentional and has to be very, very wise. You have to be aware of the fact also that some people don't want a Savior. And eventually they will make that very, very clear. Some people will. And they'll make it clear, and they, Harley wants Joker to be helped, to be healed, to be saved. But Joker likes being broken. He wants to live in chaos. And eventually, you have to see that sometimes in the person that you love or you admire and say, then I have to cut off and step back. This is just another reason that Jesus modeled life in community. He spent time with 12 people that he was showing how to do this. He was showing them how to have this kind of life in community, and he rubbed off on them, and eventually they went and they rubbed off on others diatribo. And it's such a powerful statement when we see pictures of this in Scripture. Listen to Hebrews 10. How different is this than Joker and Harley and the toxic relationship they have? Hebrews 10, let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. So instead of destructive relationships, the Bible tells us, walk with the wise. Be around Batman. Be around people with biblical wisdom and accountability and encouragement and a constant motivation to love and serve. Walk with the wise and become wise. Your circle determines your direction. I'll end with this contrast. One of the things that Patrick Clark, comic nerd at Momentum, told me was that the Joker, in many ways, is the flip side of Batman. In many ways, he's just the flip side of him. Where Batman has rules he will not break, the Joker has no rules, no sense of moral direction at all. Batman seeks to bring law and order to Gotham as both Batman and Bruce Wayne, but the Joker thrives on chaos and anarchy. And the point is very, very simple, but it's very, very clear from this proverb. You have a choice to make between spending time walking with a spiritual Batman and also investing in spiritual Robins, walking with the wise and becoming wise, or on the other side, standing next to the chaos and foolishness and being rubbed off on by the Joker. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Let's pray.